have a very exclusive interview coming up, and one that I think you should all just stop and listen to. Rajesh Kumar Singh joining us, Defense Secretary. And, you know, we've been waiting to do this conversation because of everything we've seen after Operation Sindoor, the realization that the might of the indigenous defense companies has grown to this extent. Mr. Singh, let's just start right there. And we see this from all perspectives. Of course, the stocks are going up, etc. But this is something that has been decades in the making.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Good to be with you.
Good morning, sir. So, you know, we were just setting up the context of our conversation, saying that it is after Operation Sindoor that the masses have realized what is the prowess of Indian defense companies. But tell us about the policy push and the journey before that.
Yeah, so I think we are, I mean, the buzzword or the slogan that the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has given to this, to our defense industry is that we have to be Atmanirbhar, we have to be self-reliant, and that is the sort of driving agenda for our policy push in this regard. What we do is we ensure that imports become the exception rather than the norm. And increasingly, we do almost, last year, for example, of the contracts that we signed of record 2,09,000 crores, 81% was awarded to the domestic industry. So, you know, that should make it very clear that our intent is to manufacture in India, preferably with design also in India. But where we don't have the technology, we will do technology transfers. We will encourage public and private industries to get those technologies, but the manufacturing process will have to be in India, and we intend also to use the buying power of the in any case the defense industry is a monopsony. The single buyer is the government. Government will also use its buying power to ensure that domestic industry gets the bulk of our procurement orders, and when it comes to foreign OEM manufacturers, they will have to set up business in India in order to get access to our procurement orders.
So, you know, just to point out or underline the point that, yes, there is one part of it which is government push, and that's through Make in India schemes, etc., and giving that kind of push to local manufacturers. The other is the quality of what the local manufacturers are putting out. And that now seems to have come of age. Would that be a fair assessment for someone sitting outside?
I think that is quite correct. I mean, increasingly you will find that in certain areas, like for example, artillery guns and armored vehicles, or in some categories of missiles like the BrahMos and the Akash, we've come of age. We've got cutting edge, global benchmarked products, perhaps exceeding global levels. There are other areas where there would still be a technology lag, I would say, and in those areas where indigenous technology has not quite achieve the cutting edge levels, we will have to go for technology transfers, but rest assured the production, for the most part, the bulk of the production will be done in India.
Mr. Singh, good morning to you. A lot of our viewers have been watching everything that the government has done, and of course, what they want to know to a certain extent is with regard to the capability that you've been building over the last several years, and what happens from this point. Will there be an acceleration of building up of capability? And the spend, of course, is already penciled in. But does that spend and the way that the spend is taking place, because of the change in warfare, does the nature of the spend change?
Yes, I mean, you are right about all of those points. India will have to adapt to the emerging trends in warfare. Obviously, unmanned systems of various kinds, drones, etc., will have to be given a boost when it comes to our defense capabilities. Frankly, India's drone manufacturing ecosystem, for the most part, is confined to drones that are not military grade, to be very blunt about it. And in fact, when we did trials recently, we didn't find too many manufacturers who are achieving military grade drone technology capacity. But there are at least 3 or 4 promising companies, some indigenous, some with technology tie-ups with foreign vendors. We are hoping some of them will come of age and we'll have our own large domestic drone manufacturing capacity in the country, because India needs to be a drone superpower in order to become a military, in order to enhance its military prowess. On the broader issue of capability enhancement, in the context of Operation Sindoor, there are certain areas which worked very well. There are others where there are some capability gaps. I'm not going to go into specifics of those gaps for obvious reasons, but we will be working hard on filling these gaps. We've empowered the services with emergency procurement powers in order to ensure replenishment of ammunition and specialized types of equipment wherever those are urgently required. In the longer run, through the normal procurement process also, we will be sort of focused on ensuring that those capability voids are fully resolved and nullified over the course of the next 2 years. If you see the overall contract signings that we've been doing in the last 1 year, in the last financial year, we signed contracts worth 2,09,000 crores. That is not only a record, it is the double of the previous highest that we've ever done. So the intent is clear that we will give visibility to the domestic industry when it comes to contracts, and we will provide a level playing field for the private sector by ensuring that all of our projects, practically all, whether it is AMCA, which is a development model, or whether it is normal shipbuilding contracts, these are not going to be given on nomination. These are all going to be put out for tender to get genuine price discovery and also create a level playing field for the private industry.
Mr. Singh, sir, good morning to you. A word on what has led to this reinvigorated abilities, if not in drones, but in a lot of other factors with Indian manufacturers, because for the longest time, we were known to be an import nation. So I'm sure there were policies put into place to encourage them to do this. Now there is a proof of concept, and now maybe there is size with the Indian manufacturers to not just make for India, but for the world as well. So is this a present continuous policy that will last and only get enhanced, sir?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you are right. Almost 65% of our procurements used to be imports a few years back. Now the trend has reversed. As I mentioned, last year's contracts, 81% were with domestic manufacturers. This is the result of the policy triggers that we've put in, meaning that imports will be an exception and will require a special permission from the Defense Acquisition Council. Otherwise, every other procurement will be through various types of domestic procurement categories, which include what we call Buy Indian, which involves an Indian manufacturer, perhaps with a tie-up with a partner from abroad, but with a 50% localization. There are other categories where we provide, where we insist on complete IDDM, which means that design and manufacturing will entirely take place in India. And we've seen success with that in areas like artillery, as I mentioned. So yeah, I mean, the policy trigger combined with ease of doing business, the increase in the FDI limit to 74%, and increasingly our procurement models where we give a pretty, we reduce the entry barriers for the private sector. That combination of factors is now creating what I would say is an inflection point for the private sector industry in the country. The defense companies, you would have seen, are showing double-digit growth in many cases when it comes to their value of sales. They're also generating quite a lot of export orders, and that is really traditionally being driven by the private sector. Although in the recent past, last year, the public sector has also begun to catch up. So all these triggers, I would say, are driving the creation of a defense ecosystem in the country where the public and the private sector both play an increasingly important role.
Got it. Sir, by the way, sir, just mentioning that while multiple viewers would be watching this across platforms, we also have representatives from the industry who are on the show and listening into every word that you say. So thank you for that. A follow-up, Mr. Singh, on what's the visibility that is being given out here? Because one is, of course, that we are procuring a lot from Indian shores, whether via a tie-up or via actual production being done only in India by Indian companies. But two is also for private companies to take the capex plans to set up capacities. I'm guessing there is a line of visibility being given by the country to them that this is the kind of procurement that will happen from the Indian shores for an X number of years. Could you dwell a little bit on that?
Yes, so I mean, let me give you a few examples.
Sure, sir.
Large contracts that we signed in the recent past, all of them, for example, HAL or Bharat Electronics, all of them, they're not doing everything in-house. Obviously, they are relying on a network of vendors. So when I give a large contract to HAL, the network of vendors who are working with them also get complete visibility and assurance that a set of orders are coming. Now, when it comes to HAL, for example, my understanding is that they have an order book of almost 6 years right now. And Bell would be something similar. So yes, the visibility is there, and the people who are in the industry, I'm sure, are very well aware of what the downstream opportunities are for vendors and component and sub-assembly makers when it comes to these large orders. I don't think I think the supply chain has pretty good visibility. What they want is assurance of these orders continuing, and I'm more than happy to give that assurance that even next year we will sustain this level of contract signings in terms of at least another 2 lakh crores of contracts, as well as ensuring that the bulk of these goes to the domestic industry.
Mr. Singh, on just that point, I want to understand if there has been any idea on increasing the amount of defense spends or sizes of contracts post Operation Sindoor, or has that not come into consideration yet?
So let me take you back. What has been happening for the last few years actually is that the available capital acquisition budget often was not getting fully spent because the contract signings, the procurement process was often too delayed. And we actually had the phenomena of surrenders of money at the end of the financial year. So obviously you can't ask for more if you're not even, fully utilizing what you've been given. Last year, of course, we did hit we did ensure that our budget was fully utilized. With that in mind, while I'm not going to talk about the next year, but in the future, we should be able to sustain higher levels of expenditure. And with that level of utilization, for example, for the current year, we've already started with a bang. We've already achieved almost 22% of our yearly spend. So if you sustain that level of utilization, you can ask for more. But at a broader level, if you're asking me whether we should be getting a higher share of the GDP, yes, we should. We are right now at 1.9% of the GDP when it comes to defense expenditure overall. The capex part is only about 0.5% of the GDP. My view is that it should go up by about at least 20% CAGR every year on the capex front, leading to a 5-year target of achieving about 2.5% of the GDP by the end of the next financial year. That's the sort of target that I would request the Finance Ministry and the Finance Commission to help us sustain. But it also, as I said, depends on our own absorptive capacity. In MOD, when it comes to getting the contracts through, and in the industry in terms of fulfilling those contracts. And let me tell you, there are lots of gaps when it comes to contract fulfillment as well, particularly on the part of many of these large companies who also face major supply chain issues.
So just to drive home that point, or to talk about some of the issues that you're facing as a buyer of this equipment, where do the delays come through from, and what needs to be done, in your opinion, to hasten the timelines? Ultimately, these are often very highly intensive technology-driven projects that take time, and the gestation period is large. So is there a way, in your opinion, that the timelines can be scrunched?
Yes, so it is a problem that is not confined to our own industry. I think geopolitical factors also played a part, and many of our contracts, let's take a few examples. The S-400 got held up because of the conflict there, and the fourth and the fifth batteries are now probably going to come next year after almost a 2-year delay. The G404 engines got held up, and as a result, our Tejas supply chain disruption led to a 2-year gap with a 2-year delay in terms of the deliveries of the Tejas fighters. So some of these are linked to global supply chain issues. Others could be internal management failures or inability to plan. What I can do is, of course, ensure that contract signings are done on time, industry gets visibility, and thereafter we follow up in terms of project management to ensure that our vendors are held accountable. At the end of the day, you can't have a situation where you do an emergency procurement which was meant to be completed in 1 year, and there are vendors seeking time after 2 or even 3 years for more time to fulfill those contracts. So it's obviously, I'm not saying it's a factor which affects only the domestic manufacturers, it affects global manufacturers as well. But somewhere the accountability will have to be ensured when it comes to contract fulfillment as well, both from the public and from the private sector.
Mr. Singh, I don't know how much of a liberty can we have on a call like this, but I would love to understand, sir, what are the next frontiers? Because I heard you say in your earlier answer that, for example, in drone technology, not everybody is able to produce military-grade drones. So is that a near and present target that Indian companies be at the forefront of producing, more companies be at the forefront of producing military-grade drones? What else, sir? What is it? Whatever you can share.
So if you see what is happening, we are looking at areas like, of course, drones we've talked about, electronic warfare of different types, obviously standoff weapons of different types, from precision-guided munitions, where we still don't have enough domestic capacity, different types of radars, for example. Again, there are a lot of capability gaps there. Long-range missiles of certain types. We have good capacity in certain areas, but in air-to-air missiles, for example, we don't have enough capacity. The Astra program is ongoing, but it is lagging, and we need to catch up quickly. So yes, there are a few gaps, but at the same time, there are good areas where we've actually hit we are at the forefront when it comes to things like, as I mentioned, artillery guns, armored vehicles of different types, certain kinds of missiles, even multi-barrel rocket launchers. Pinaka is a very proven platform, but we need to take it higher to 300-kilometer range, which is what some of our adversaries have already achieved. So yes, there are lots of good areas where we've made progress. There are others where there are capability voids which we need to fulfill. And I'm very clear that we have to be pragmatic. Where the DRDO technologies are available, we have to leverage that. Where those are 5 or 10 years down the line in terms of development, we'll have to bring in foreign technology as a tie-up with Indian public sector and private sector manufacturers with transfer of technology to produce those cutting-edge platforms within the country. But full-scale imports or fully global buys will obviously be minimized.
Mr. Singh, just my last question to you, and just to say how proud we are as Indians, and of course we track this space from an equity perspective as well, on where we are. Just trying to understand, as our capex push moves forward, how much of it or how much of the focus is going to be on R&D, where we are no longer dependent on, say, transfer of technology, we are at the cutting edge of what we want to do in this space?
Yes, so I would say that the government is doing its bit, not only in defense, but across the board. I think you would be aware that 2/3 of the R&D spend in this country is done by the public sector. The private sector has to step up more, particularly in this area of defense, where technology is the king, and the difference between you and your adversary can often simply be the level of technology that you're using. So yes, this is an area where we would request the private sector to also provide increasingly for R&D funding. There are one or two examples of companies who are doing that. I don't want to mention them because it's not appropriate. But in addition to that, of course, the DRDO has developed a good licensing model for giving its technology over to the private sector without any royalties, and that those initiatives are also bearing fruit now with certain types of platforms that I had mentioned earlier. So yes, it's a common sort of push that is required both in the public and the private sector to increase R&D support. The government is already doing its part, we will do more, but the private sector also needs to step up, because end of the day, this is something that I had mentioned before the CII's annual business meet as well, that if you are getting into the defense industry, there are two things you better have. You better have a full-scale engineering department, and you better have capital equipment on your shop floor. If you don't have either and you are here to make a fast buck, then this industry is not for you. Here we want you to invest for the long road, invest in R&D, invest in capital equipment, and invest in the human resources to provide cutting-edge weaponry to our armed forces, who, as all of you would have seen, have just shown their mettle during Operation Sindoor.